I'm talking today to Arthur Goldstuck, who is the MD of WorldWideWorx. WorldWideWorx is a market research company in South Africa that specialises in looking at the uses of technology in that market. Arthur, you've done a lot of work on the use of the mobile internet. Tell me, what are the key findings of that research?
In our latest mobile internet study, which was released earlier this year, we felt that we had uncovered groundbreaking information and data on how and why people take up things like mobile internet browsing on their phones. And it's got a lot to do with the capability of the phone, but it's also got to do with people becoming aware of what you can do on the phone. So for example, only about 6% of respondents said that they're currently using Twitter on their phones. But when you asked what they're going to do next, 23% said that they would be using Twitter. And that's because they're hearing about it from their friends, on the media, personalities are talking about it in mass media, in the sporting environment, and so on. So there's a great interest and appetite in this kind of application, and they see it on their phones. So sooner or later they're going to try it out. So there's a strong interaction between what's on the phone and what's being talked about in the marketplace.
So in a way, people persuade people.
Exactly. It's social media in more senses than one. It's not just about it being defined as social media, but it's what's happening in your social environment as well.
A question that interests me is that you obviously have a point where you get a critical mass of people, so it then begins to feed off itself. You know, there's enough people in the room that 90% have got a mobile phone, so the 10% say we must join the club at this point. What do you think that sort of critical mass point is in South Africa? How many people have to be using something for it to be taken up?
That's a good question, because until about 2 years ago we couldn't really measure the mobile internet in South Africa. There were just too few users. And it's interesting that when something does appear on the radar and you can measure it, it usually indicates that you've got what you might call an early critical mass. And the early critical mass being enough people for it to be measurable. But I guess
And in the South African context, what would that be as a number?
That would be probably a few 100,000 users. But then to measure it accurately on a national basis, you probably need something like 1 million users. So that's what you might call the later critical mass. And I think that's where we've just reached with Twitter, for example. With browsing on the phone, we reached that 2 or 3 years ago. It started very slowly, but it suddenly exploded in the last 2 years. So suddenly we find something like 6 million people in South Africa browsing the internet on their phones. And 2 years ago, we were wondering if it was worth even including in our questionnaires because there was such low take-up and such low awareness. But the advent of the smartphone has changed everything.
And is YouTube showing up on your research results?
YouTube is still very small, because one of the things that's driving mobile internet usage is the fact that you can get certain data bundles that make it very cheap. Like on BlackBerry, for example, you can get unlimited BlackBerry service for 57 Rand a month, which is essentially less than $10 a month. So it suddenly becomes a no-brainer to go browsing the internet, downloading email. But there's one exception. Streaming video and streaming music is not included in the unlimited packages. So people are avoiding YouTube, for example, on their BlackBerries. Not that it's a great experience on the BlackBerry, but it is dictated to some extent by the cost of data, and that is holding back video on the cell phone. So video is one exception.
To some extent, the operators are still rationing bandwidth. There's still that mentality, isn't there?
Very much so. We've just seen the very first truly competitive mobile data rate announced in South Africa. That's with ATA. We, for example, saw with ATA, Telkom's mobile service, they just announced that mobile broadband would be sold at something like 200 Rand for 10 gigs of data capacity. That works out at 2 cents a megabyte, which is unprecedented in South Africa, where until recently it was 2 Rand a megabyte. And in fact, the ad hoc cost of using data on a cell phone or a 3G modem with the other networks is still 2 Rand a megabyte. So the ad hoc cost still hasn't come down in 6 years, and yet we now have a network offering for 2 cents a megabyte mobile broadband. So I think we're going to see a rapid shift in pricing and usage in the coming years.
And how many smartphones are in the market, and who are the market leaders?
There are about 5 million smartphones in the market at the moment, but it's growing very rapidly, and the fastest growing brand in South Africa is BlackBerry. In our mobility study, which produced the mobile internet and mobile consumer reports, we found that 4% of South Africans at the end of last year were using BlackBerry. But when we asked them what phone they would buy next, something like 20% said they would buy a BlackBerry next. And that kind of brand momentum is almost unprecedented in South Africa. The big losers are Nokia, although in percentage terms it doesn't look big. They're going to drop from something like 51% to 48% market share, which is still a very nice market share. But considering that they were at around 75% not too long ago, it's quite staggering to see how fast they're falling. And the other big loser in the short term is Samsung, which had built up to 28%, very quietly. I think people didn't realize the impact in the youth market especially, but BlackBerry is taking all of that away again. And the question is whether BlackBerry internationally can survive long enough to sustain South Africa's BlackBerry revolution.
And we're here at the Broadcast Film and Film Africa conference in Nairobi. You were talking on mobile TV. Give me your view as to the future of mobile TV. It's something that never quite seems to gain traction.
I've always been skeptical about mobile TV, and our research has always backed up that skepticism. So in 2006, for example, during the FIFA World Cup, we asked people if they had used mobile TV and do they intend to use mobile TV. And at that time, MTN was marketing mobile TV quite heavily, but there was only one single phone on the market. It was a Samsung mobile TV phone, maybe one other that could actually receive the DVB-H signal that MTN were talking about. So it's a very strange time that the service was being marketed heavily, but you couldn't really use this service. And because of that, there was great expectations that were dashed in terms of mobile TV. Something like 12% said that they would try mobile TV. We asked the same question a year later, 1% said that they would try mobile TV. So dashed expectations in technology is a great killer of the future potential of that technology. And until last year even, we saw that same level of lack of interest in mobile TV. So we asked how many people have used mobile TV? 2% had used it. The breakdown of that, when you look at urban-rural, in the urban environment it was 3%, and in the rural environment it was 1% of people had used it. And the difference, we believe, is because TV is a social activity, it's a communal activity, and far more so in the rural environment than in the urban environment. So that dictates the extent to which people are willing to take it up. But what's interesting is that during the time of the survey, although very few people had actually used mobile TV, the publicity and coverage and marketing of mobile TV suddenly reached a crescendo again, because DVB-H was licensed for the first time in South Africa, and DSTV rolled out its DSTV mobile service. At the same time as that, Vodacom announced a range of packages, essentially DSTV bouquets, but modified for the mobile environment. So suddenly there was great awareness, and no less than 48% of respondents said that they would try it out. But there's a big caveat there, and we believe that it's an intention that's not necessarily going to be met by action. So don't assume future intentions will result in future action, and especially not in the mobile TV environment where there's so much going against it.
Arthur, thanks for talking to me today.
Thank you, Russ.